Thank you for that introduction. I don't consider myself a transplant. I consider myself a refugee from Soviet America.
Welcome.
Before I get to the remarks that I intended to give at the beginning, I just wanted to add something to what Don said. I know that Republicans and everybody in this room doesn't want to regulate businesses. But businesses are already regulated from head to toe.
Right.
If you look at what happened at the beginning of COVID, businesses didn't have a choice about whether to shut down or not. Businesses didn't have a choice about whether they were going to make their customers wear masks. And more fundamentally, businesses, if we want to make businesses free of regulation, if we want to end regulation for businesses, let's get rid of the minimum wage. Let's get rid of OSHA. Let's get rid of the civil rights laws. Until you're ready to fight for that, don't tell me we're going to have this little carve-out for the one area of totalitarianism that the government has already implanted into the brains of all these businesses. Sorry, we're not making that deal. Okay, so thank you, Don. I came here tonight to talk about the Supreme Court cases that were decided last week and to which Don alluded. Although we sort of look at it as a split decision, we won on the OSHA mandate and we lost on the healthcare workers mandate. I take a more dim view of those cases. There were some striking things that were really missing from those opinions, and striking things that were missing from the good guys, from our heroes, from Justice Thomas and Justice Alito and Justice Gorsuch. And I just wanted to highlight it for you because I think we need to be aware of it. As a litigator, I know, and Don knows, and Lauren knows, the thing that really moves a case, the thing that really persuades, is a good, crisp explanation of the facts. Our guys stuck to a technocratic, bureaucratic interpretation of the statutory authority in the case. Whereas the other side, they went to some visual descriptions of the facts. And let me just read a little bit about it for you. From Breyer's dissent in the OSHA case, he says, every day COVID-19 poses grave dangers to the citizens of this country, and particularly to its workers. The disease has by now killed 1 million Americans and hospitalized almost 4 million. It spreads by person-to-person contact. He goes on later, he says, COVID-19, in short, is a menace in work settings. Further, he says, the virus that causes COVID-19 is a new hazard, as well as a physically harmful agent. The virus also poses a grave danger to millions of American employees. And he goes on, and he uses this evocative language, and it's really moving. And nobody on our side rebutted it. And in the majority opinion that Sotomayor wrote in the mandate case, she has some similar language. I'm not gonna read it to you, but the point is, our side didn't respond to any of it. Nobody stood up and said, hey, wait a minute, these vaccines don't even work. Hey, wait a minute, COVID isn't really that deadly. If you're under 70 years old, it's got about a 99.7% recovery rate. And that's if you even get it. Not everybody even gets it. So our guys didn't really fight the fight on the facts. And I think that if everybody in this room is an activist, but your standard Fox News watching grandma and grandpa, if they read those opinions, I think they'd look at them and they'd say, what are you guys talking about, Justice Thomas, and to our guys? They'd say, there's an emergency. People are dying. And what are you talking about? The Constitution? I mean, sure, that's important. But I think their reaction would be sort of like how we feel when some liberal justice writes an opinion that lets off a serial killer who made a confession, but for whom the police, the officers who got the confession, didn't read him his rights properly. And we all want to abide by the Constitution, but we know the guy did it, he killed people, reprimand the officers, but the guy should still be punished. And I think that in this COVID situation, that's what the typical, non-activist, just Fox News watching person, grandma, grandpa, if you read those opinions, the bad guys' opinions were a lot more persuasive, in my opinion. Not because I wanted them to win, I think they got the wrong answer, but our guys just stuck to this really dry explanation of what's the statutory authority, and Justice Gorsuch, who I'm going to take to task for the second thing that's really missing from these opinions. He starts off his opinion, his concurrence, in the OSHA case, and he says, the central question we face today is, who decides? No one doubts that the COVID-19 pandemic has posed challenges for every American, or that state, local, and national governments all have roles to play in combating the disease. The only question is whether an administrative agency in Washington, one charged with overseeing workplace safety, may mandate the vaccination of regular testing of 84 million people, or whether, as 27 states before us submit, that work belongs to state and local governments across the country and the people's elected representatives in Congress. Now, notice that he says there is a role for government to act here. He just concedes that point outright. He doesn't challenge any premise, any factual premise of whether this is really an emergency situation, doesn't even mention the fact that this has been going on for 2 years with no end in sight. And in fact, not only is there no end in sight, the regulations are coming on. They're coming harder. And what else is missing from that? What else is missing? The individual into whose body the poison is going to be, the foreign substance is going to be put in. I won't even say poison, it's a foreign substance. And you have a right as an individual to decide what does and does not go into your body. Right. That is fundamental. Yeah. And he doesn't say a thing about it, nor do any of our other heroes. And I want to read something to you. If they really wanted to just stick to factless, dry, legal, constitutional law, they had a great quote from, of all cases, Planned Parenthood versus Casey. And I want to read it to you because it's so on point, and it would have been the right thing to say. And this is a quote from Casey. It's on page 572, I believe. Roe versus Wade, however, may be seen not only as an exemplar of Griswold liberty. Griswold was a 1965 case that legalized contraceptives for married couples, but as a rule, whether or not mistaken, of personal autonomy and bodily integrity with doctrinal affinity to cases recognizing limits on governmental power to mandate medical treatment or to bar its rejection. Where the heck was that? There were factual arguments that could have been made about the efficacy of these vaccines. There were factual arguments that could have been made, for instance, about the PrEP Act, which abrogates liability for the manufacturers and the distributors of these vaccines. How can you force somebody to take a vaccine and then take away his right to sue if anything goes wrong with that? And how do these justices not bother to mention that? They just ignored it. And so it looks like, if you just read the opinions, the liberal justices talk about this great emergency. And the conservative justices don't bother to rebut that. Where were they? So I was really disappointed. I don't look at it as a split victory. I look at it as a surrender. We got a tactical win, but this was an opportunity for our justices to stand up and to challenge the underlying premises of what's going on, to challenge the facts, and as I read from Casey, to stick it in the liberals' faces.
Yes.
Okay? If you look at the end of his dissent, Breyer wags his finger at our conservative justices and says, how dare you as judges overrule what the elected branches say? This is what the executive branch wants to do. The Congress passed a law, the executive has this agency, and the executive branches are responsible. We judges aren't elected by anyone. We aren't responsible to anyone. We don't have to sit for re-election. He makes a standard conservative argument. Where were our guys? Why couldn't they throw it in their face, the Casey opinion that I just read from you? So I'm really disappointed about that. But does that mean we should stop fighting cases? And I say the answer is no. Why do I say no? Number one, we can't concede any area of the battlefield in this war.
That's right.
Okay? We have to fight everywhere.
Yes.
Because the enemy is fighting everywhere.
Yes.
Okay? And just look, I mean, even if you think that we're not going to win, and, you know, Don and Lauren and I have talked, some of these cases are really uphill battles, especially the cases against private entities. Nonetheless, we still have to fight. Biden, you saw at the beginning of the video that we saw earlier, Biden admitted he doesn't want to push for a mandate. We didn't see it in the video, but he has admitted multiple times that it's unconstitutional and that they don't have the power to do it. Psaki said it, they all said it, they all know it. And then what do? They go forward with it anyway. And why do they do it? Number one, to fatigue us. Number two, to distract us and make us defend while they can do something else.
Right.
And then number three, they got lucky. They won half the battle, and they really won more than half the battle. I mean, if it's unconstitutional, all of it should have been struck down. You know, Gorsuch's opinion also talks about the major questions doctrine. Ooh, big yawn. Okay? He says, you know, when Congress wants an agency to enact a major political or economic change, Congress needs to speak so directly. Well, where was the concurrence from Justice Thomas or from Justice Alito asking Justice Gorsuch, Mr. Justice Gorsuch, where in Article 1, Section 8 does Congress have the power to speak to that, to delegate that power, even if they had wanted to do it? They don't. They don't.
Right.
So, but anyway, the other side is fighting on every front. They're not afraid to waste our time, our money, our energy, even when they think they're going to lose. So we really need to be willing to fight them.
Yep.
We need to also remember always, I apologize. We also always need to remember that the facts are always really important. You know, we've got to be willing to know what the facts are about these vaccines. We've got to know what the facts are about COVID. We've got to know about what the facts are about the efficacy of the vaccines, that they don't prevent transmission, that they don't prevent you from contracting it, and that they actually are dangerous. And we need to not be afraid to say it. So I guess in closing, I'm just going to say we have to keep fighting.
Yes.
There are going to be wins, there are going to be losses, but we can't just sit on the sidelines. And I'm proud to be working with Lauren. I'm proud to be working with Don. Lauren is running for Attorney General in South Carolina. And I'm hoping that someday soon you're going to be in a position to really enact some change.